Sitaram again to each and every one of you. Welcome back to the program Conversations with Zalisa right here on TV Jaagriti. I trust you enjoy that replay we had with Chanel, that interview with Chanel and Dr. Suka, and earlier on with regards to breast cancer. Unfortunately, Attorney at Law Mr. Atish Ramgobin could not join us this morning due to circumstances beyond his control. And of course, much thanks going out to Vishala Ganesh, head of news, for her delivery of our 9 a.m. News update. This morning, I'm quite privileged, and I do feel also very blessed to be in the presence of a dynamic gentleman with a brilliant mind. He's a walking institution, and we'll know a little more about him. We know of his books and his great work and his achievement, the many hats that he would wear with regards to culture in this country. He's very instrumental when it comes to culture. But this morning, we're going to be in conversation with Dr. Kumar Mahabir. Dr. Mahabir wrote many books, and we're going to talk about that and his journey. And he is also the editor-in-chief and chairman of the Indo-Caribbean Cultural Center Company Limited. So, of course, let's say Sitaram, and a very warm welcome to Dr. Mahabir.
Thank you.
Doc, your achievements throughout the year, phenomenal, fantastic. And let's go down memory lane, and let's start with what ignited that flame that would inspire you to become such a brilliant person with regards to that imaginative mind and creative, and taking those ideas and putting it to pen and paper and so that we could be enriched. Tell us.
Well, it's a challenging question, and I don't know if I have the answer, but maybe people who will perhaps someday write about me can decipher what really influenced my life to become a writer and a publisher. But I think it is because of where I grew up. I grew up in the countryside in Pamitan, which is a neighboring beach close to Manzalina, on the margin of the Nariva swamp. And we grew up in the countryside at a time when there was no electricity, no running water, and so on. There were no libraries, and so we had to stay home. There wasn't this. The cinema was quite in Sani Grande. You had Ascot Cinema and Silk Cinema.
Yeah.
And they were about 12 miles away, but it's countryside, so you don't always get easy transport. And so we were confined to home. My father owned and worked in a cocoa and citrus plantation, which we owned. We also had a shop, liquor shop, and a grocery store.
Yeah.
And so we were confined to home. Neighbors were few and far between. And my parents really encouraged us to stay home and not to really mix with the community as much, because boys my age had a tendency to drink and smoke.
Be easily influenced.
So yes, so they didn't want that bad influence. So, you know, they kind of partitioned me from mixing too much and socializing too much with the guys my age. So we were confined to home. And of course, naturally, you turn to reading, because there was no television then.
Right.
We had radio, and the villagers would come to our house to listen to the news.
Yes.
And to Indian Talent on Parade, and so on. Those early radio shows.
And you had a great appreciation for that from then, that
so
cultural
we turned to
aspect.
reading, and I think one of the influences was that my eldest brother was a teacher.
Yes.
So he would bring books at home and be reading himself and so on. And I think he became my role model.
Very nice.
Into getting into a love for reading and the written word. And so I started to read and wanted to write. From very early, I knew I wanted to be a writer.
Yes.
From maybe primary school.
Wow.
I recall taking a little copybook, as you would call it, and starting to write stories and so on. And I really wanted to document my life in the countryside, life in the village, life in an isolated community, life in cocoa and citrus estate and so on. And I think that's where the journey started.
Well, we see a lot of that that being reflected in your books and your achievements, like the Indian Caribbean folklore spirits, and you have the medicine,
medicinal and edible plants. Right?
Yes,
so
I see that as well.
As early as 1990.
Really?
And it has been a bestseller.
Excellent.
I've often, ever so often, I have to do a reprint. I intend to do a new edition sometime and add some more plants and so on. But it's a book which has been owned by almost every Indian household in Trinidad and Tobago.
That's nice. It must be very rewarding to know that people appreciate your work and they respect what you do, and so much that they would go out and support with regards to educating themselves and empowering themselves. So we're looking at the medical aspect of things. I also see that you have the traditional medicine women and healers in Trinidad as well.
So
talk about that a little bit.
Actually a very interesting book which I think people don't know much about, because in that book, by the way, it's in a way a modified version, a watered down version of my PhD dissertation, which I wrote and submitted and successfully defended at the University of Florida, where I got my PhD in anthropology, in medical anthropology, to be specific. In that book, I have captured a lot of the traditional folk healing practices. Jarring, for instance, the Nara and the Butchet and so on. And all of these traditional practices which we have been doing and which sadly is disappearing. When a child gets najar and so on, what do you do with the onion and the garlic and the bird pepper and all of that? And so it has a lot of the folklore, medical folklore in there. Hook, for instance, Butchet, Nara, Maljo, and almost everything, all these medicinal practices are contained in that book.
I truly believe it's something that the younger generations should gravitate towards with regards to the knowledge that they're going to get. That you rightfully said, perhaps if you ask a child from this new generation, what is Nara or what is Jare, they don't know.
Or Hasli.
Exactly, Hasli. What is Hasli? And Hasli is basically when, the
dislocation
that's
in the bone,
right.
the clavicle,
That's right. One of the books that I read, and I was, the Indian Caribbean folklore spirits, I thought that was really very good.
Right. So I have written about 12 books and still going, hopefully February next month, or by the latest, next month, January, and February, which will be the following month, I am going to publish a book of entitled Multiple Identities, Essays on Caribbean Literature. So that would be a book that is different from all of these, because that book deals very little with Indians. It's on Caribbean authors, Selvon, Naipaul, and Metalholzer, and Laming and so on, a lot of these writers, which you would study when you are doing a first degree in literature in English. So that book should be out by February next year for the latest.
Good.
So I've written a number of books and still going. I mean, it's what I do. It's the oxygen I breathe.
You took the challenge to write, to work with Sri Satnarayan Maharaj for many years. You've worked one-on-one. I would see you come in and spend time with him in his office. I know you had that interaction with him to understand this great man. To me, he's a great man. He'll always be. People always ask me about a hero. And I mean, apart from my father being my first hero, I would always say Sri Satnarayan Maharaj, because in my thinking, he is a living hero. You wrote the Hindu view of Trinidad and Tobago articles that he would have written. And then, of course, the ever-powering Satmaraj.
The biography.
Yeah, that's right. What was it like to work with such a dynamic and powerful man who came, like yourself, from very humble beginnings?
So I wrote the biography, authorized biography of Satmaraj, which is this book here, which has a lovely artistic representation by an artist, Hayden Jiawan. And this is the biography which captures his entire life from his birth to the present time.
Yes.
Since he was a monitor as a teacher in a primary school, Presbyterian primary school.
That's right.
In Caroni and so on. Riding, going to the cinema in Purep and riding to as far as Sunny Grind with a bicycle. He and his friend, Mr. Sukdev, who you probably know.
Yes, yes.
Yeah, childhood friend. So they went to locate a place for him to stay when he was posted in Plum Road Presbyterian School and then Beach Presbyterian School. So they went riding from Caroni to Sani Grande with a bicycle to find a place for him to stay. So the book captures all of that. Very interesting, and the World War and so on and everything else. And so this book, I had it in my mind a long time. This book was in the making for about 8 years.
8 years?
Yeah, taking different drafts and so on. I didn't attend to it in a dedicated, continuous way. It was sporadically I was working on it. And so I've interviewed a number of his friends, a number of his relatives and so on, his children. And I would show him drafts of the book from time to time. And of course, I'll interview him in the BOM office and here. I don't think Jaagriti was set up then, but mainly in the BOM office. And I interviewed a number of people who knew him. And I have a lot of lovely photographs, the historic photographs of him as a little boy in short pants and so on, when he was a teacher. Even when you were a teacher, you wore short pants long ago. So he was there with the slingshot and so on. I captured him and the train and all that. Lovely stories of history. And what is remarkable about Sat is that he never really dictated what I should write. This is quite different from how people may perceive of him as a dictator and so on.
He's not. I agree.
Yes. So he gave me free rein. And I wrote the book and so on. And we had a big launch. And then I wrote the collected essays, which is that one there, Hindu View of Trinidad and Tobago. And again, we had a big launch. And hopefully we'll have a launch sometime next year, hopefully. Keep my fingers crossed, because I'm working on another project which I don't want to disclose.
Very nice.
But Sat is a remarkable man. He is a hero. He is an icon.
Yes.
Even people who often disagree with him believe that he is such a courageous man. He speaks his mind.
Yes, he's very verbal and very open and very expressive.
Right.
And like you say, a lot of people think that he is he is a dictator, and he could come off as being a very harsh person, but in reality he's the opposite of that. He's very kind and understanding. And
so he is a hero to many people.
He is.
And when I go to Suriname and when I go to Canada, you know what people tell me? They wish they had a Sat Maharaj in their community.
To stand up.
To stand up. And even yesterday I was in Plumita. We went to make cook and so on, cascadoo and whatnot, in a ranch with some guys and so on. It was fun.
Yes.
And people are saying that there seems to be no successor on the horizon. There's nobody to replace him. There's nobody, and that is sad. He is the lone voice. And they all say, when he passes away, God forbid, that the Indian community will be left vulnerable. There will be nobody to stand up to the community.
And that is because of the great work and his achievement for such, like I said, a person who came from such humble beginnings. And a lot of people will not really know and understand this gentleman, because he still lives a very humble and simple life. Simplicity. No big fuss, very, he would have water, he would have his tea. And I think these are things that people they just want to know this true man, how he emerged to be such a dynamic person that was able to move and able to inspire and to build and to be so successful at so many things.
Now, what is also remarkable about Sat is that he has had only basically a primary school education. He did correspondence course and so on, studied up to the law degree and so on, but really it was basically primary school education, and he is so remarkable. The man is so educated.
Yeah.
Because he has
He
been
is.
self-taught.
He's brilliant.
In my
Anything, any topic.
Yes.
This is for real, because
Yeah.
I interact with him,
Yeah.
that you want a simple thing as a pronunciation for a
Yes,
word, the
yes,
spelling of a
yes,
word.
yes, yes.
This man is
Yes.
phenomenal.
He's on top of things.
He is.
Current events and
For
so
his
on.
age.
For his age. So when I was interviewing him for the book and so on, he would be reading Times and Newsweek and so on, these international magazines.
Yes.
And
He's
he'd be
self-taught.
looking at Discovery Channel and CNN, you know, the very educational
Yes.
channels, BBC
Yes.
and so on. So, you know, that's how he gets his brilliance and his knowledge, because he's reading all the time and listening to educational
Now,
programs.
you have had that one-on-one interaction with him, the know-how, the understanding. To bring that book alive, you had to go into his mind
Yes.
and understand him,
Yes.
think like him,
Yes.
to be able to take that book,
Yes.
his